It sure seems like, as of now, Eli Drinkwitz is the number one candidate for the open Penn State job. Here's why that could be a good thing for Missouri.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, and welcome to Locked On Mizzou, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcasting network. And later in the program, I'm going to finish out by talking about Missouri basketball last night. Well, frankly, Minnesota just popped in the second half there. The Tigers just utterly dominate what was a bit of a concerning start once again by Missouri from my perspective. Jacob Cruz really shined in the game. Also, second segment, going to talk to Jaron Spor from Locked On Mississippi State about that ball game coming up here on Saturday. But I do want to start talking about, well, the Eli Drinkwitz situation, I guess, for lack of a better word, because based on everything I'm hearing, not only from, well, I have some sources in the Mizzou Mafia who are on the Penn State beat, and boy, it sure sounds like they're really interested in Eli Drinkwitz. And part of that actually, believe it or not, Missouri losing to Texas A&M, well, that kind of helped Eli Drinkwitz in his time and his timeline from Penn State's perspective. Really anybody's perspective who's looking for a coach. They don't want to wait until, ideally, they don't want to wait until well into the college football playoff to decide who their coach is for a whole bunch of different reasons. But maybe the most important is the transfer portal will already be open then. And there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and the best quarterbacks in particular, and yes, many of the best players in general, are going to be on the move early in the process. So again, here's why this could actually be a good thing for Missouri. Of course, if you're hearing this, you're going, ooh, Penn State, that's a blue blood program. That is actually a program that may have an easier path in the Big Ten to the college football playoff than Missouri will have in the SEC. You can certainly make that argument. But here's why I think this is actually a good thing for Missouri, because, well, Eli Drinkwitz recently on Tiger Talk went into a whole rant about how, hey, you know what? People are making too much of just, hey, it's college football playoff or bust, and going from good to great, that last step is really the most difficult step of all. And I have to say, I read that one way a couple days ago and saying, yeah, I totally agree with that. Just kind of took it at face value. But then I have to say, over the last 24 hours or so, after hearing all of the banter about Penn State's, I think, pretty obvious interest in Eli Drinkwitz at this point, well, I did have to say, I looked at it a little bit differently. And I looked at it from the perspective of, now, wait a second. Is Eli Drinkwitz just taking a big picture look at college football here, or is he actually signaling something here? Is he trying to communicate, well, to his biggest donors, to the people in charge at the University of Missouri? And if you look at it that way, well, I think that could very much be the case, that Drinkwitz is, again, angling for everything he wants for assurances at the University of Missouri, that the continued spending that you've seen, of course, not only in the north end zone, but just I'd say more importantly, the NIL infrastructure that Missouri has, well, as much as we possibly can, Missouri is going to want to keep the advantages that they've had over the last few years alive. At the very least, Missouri has to be competitive in the transfer portal, in high school recruiting, in NIL with some of the best traditional blue blood programs like Penn State, like, of course, Florida and Auburn and LSU, of course, as well. So the reason I think this could be, again, a good thing for Missouri, this is actual real leverage here. Eli Drinkwitz can parlay this real opportunity, this real interest from Penn State. Well, he can look at it one of two ways. Well, here's my escape hatch. If I don't think I can get it done at Missouri, I can go be a Nittany Lion. I personally think Eli Drinkwitz is probably looking at it like this. I think he probably genuinely is keeping his options open. I've got to think his huge preference is to stay at Missouri, where he doesn't have to start over again, where he doesn't have to navigate all of the different politics and different big money interests that are at Penn State. As I've said before, Drinkwitz has managed to navigate that maze quite well at the university in Missouri. And in fact, he's navigated it so well, he's at the finish line. He's at the top of the food chain right now. Of course, the head football coach at Penn State is always going to be one of, if not one of the most powerful people in the university. I do think the dynamic, especially the new guy on campus, it's going to be a different dynamic than what Drinkwitz has at Missouri right now. So I really think this whole Penn State situation, if Missouri is willing to give Eli Drinkwitz what he wants, and all the indications I have are that they will, I think this is going to end up maybe being a good thing for Missouri in the long run. Of course, well, the next few weeks are probably going to be a little nervous because you're going to start hearing and continue to hear really rumors and innuendo and tweets and fans putting out, well, here's what I'm hearing about Drinkwitz. And by the way, you're going to see odds at places like FanDuel Sportsbook that say, oh my God, Eli Drinkwitz is the favorite to be the coach at Penn State. Or, oh my God, Nick Saban is the betting favorite to be the next coach at LSU. And the reason I bring up Nick Saban is because, as Peter Burns of ESPN, I think very wisely reminded us here, he tweeted out, annual reminder, quote, next head coach at X university odds are merely clickbait for sports books looking for attention. Trying to decipher anything from them is almost always completely useless. And then Burns goes on to share a bunch of screenshots of exactly his point. Guys who were leaders in the clubhouse, supposedly for jobs that they never even came close to getting, in fact. So my point is, when you see Drinkwitz out there, heck, when you see Nick Saban out there as a favorite to be the head coach at LSU, for example, take that with a massive grain of salt, because it'd be one thing if these books said, hey, yes is this for Nick Saban and no is that. The fact that there is no option, see, that really will tell you something, because the no is way more likely in Nick Saban's case than the yes, and yet the sports books, they're putting out that number to make you think it's likely. And weirdly enough, with human psychology, that's going to draw people in to bet on Nick Saban, even though, as far as I can tell, there's no chance that this is going to happen. Such as Eli Drinkwitz, to some extent. Now, the chances of Eli Drinkwitz moving are much higher than Nick Saban coming out of retirement. The point here, though, is that let's just take all of these odds and stuff with a grain of salt. None of that is a reason to panic. Certainly, at least not at this point. You know what? Coming up on the program, I'm going to talk to Jaron Spor of Locked On Mississippi State, of course, about the Mizzou Bulldog game here on Saturday. And have you ever seen me start off with a take in one segment and then completely flip it? I've done it occasionally, where you're going to see me do it again coming up here with Jaron Spor. And by the way, take it away, Jaron.
Well, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State and Locked On Mizzou your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you guys so much. But I'm joined now by John Miller. We have our crossover show to do. I think it's going to be a fun game. What's your thoughts?
I'm hoping it's a fun game. That's for sure. I think it's probably going to be a relatively high-scoring game. Hopefully, Missouri's offense can get out of its way. It feels like the last few weeks it's been stuck in the mud. I know Mississippi State has finally got off the schneid here the last couple years. Jaron, how you feeling about the Jeff Lebby era? Just out of curiosity, so far.
I think you have to at least be somewhat excited about it. I mean, you go 2-10 the first year, but you had a depleted roster, and for you to go 5-5 at this point right now, after I think the over/under was 3.5, like you have to be excited about that. Now there's still concerns and there's still things he needs to iron out, and obviously if he goes, let's say 5-7, and next year there's still going to be a lot of pressure. Like the pressure isn't off just because you won 5 games and exceeded expectations. But I think he's done a lot of good. But you're also seeing a lot of stuff that it's very typical of a young head coach.
For sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains at that position. But I don't know, at least my perception from the outside is that Lebby is a good offensive mind. And yeah, I mean, honestly, you're right. I think he's still a young head coach ironing some stuff out. Yeah, some growing pains there makes total sense. I think even somebody like Eli Drinkwitz, who is in, I guess this is his, I'm trying to remember, 5th season with Missouri, 6th season, I think, as a head coach overall. Right. I mean, there's still things he's learning.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's going to take time, but I think he's done such a good job at Missouri. I know everyone talks about, well, their schedule's not been whatever.
And it is the 6th season at Missouri. I'm now just realizing I messed that up, of course. So 7th season overall. Just clean that up a little bit.
What I have always said is I don't care if your schedule's easy or not. You still got to win the games. And Missouri, before he got there, wasn't winning a lot of those games. And now he's at least gotten to the point where he really doesn't lose to teams that he shouldn't lose to.
Sure.
It's the teams that are really good that he's not quite getting over the hump yet, but I think he's done a great job there personally.
I think you make a really good point, and you've touched on something that's really been a flashpoint for Missouri fans here over the last few days, which is, okay, Drinkwitz beats who he is supposed to, but when's he going to win the big one, right? We've heard this a million times over the years, not just with coaches, but with superstar athletes, even going back to guys like Peyton Manning and Michael Jordan. People have said that about LeBron James. People have said that about. Right. So I do think where I come from, of course, I would have loved to have beaten Vanderbilt, would have loved to have beaten Alabama. Those were realistic outcomes for Missouri. Texas A&M, well, they took it to us, less realistic there. But I do think the point is, like you said, Jaron, there are steps to this. There are levels to this. At a certain point, you got to beat the teams you're supposed to before you start upsetting everyone. And, I think there have been other times in Missouri history and other times certainly in other programs' history where you've had these big upsets, but then you've struggled to consistently beat the teams you want to beat. And guess what? Those coaches ended up getting fired too. So to me, I actually kind of like the trajectory of Missouri. If sure, you can be a little bit disappointed that you're just on the cusp, but the idea that, the Missouri should be disappointed at the overall direction, I think would be foolish.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you can't take the step back because that's what James Franklin did. He was always beating the easy teams, couldn't ever beat the hard teams. Then this year he started losing to the easy teams. So at that point, you're gone. But I don't see Drinkwitz even close to being on the hot seat. But I do want to talk.
If anything, he's going to be on the opposite of the hot seat for other jobs because he's going to be a guy, if anything, the fact that Missouri's fallen a little bit short here, that doesn't hurt his appeal. In fact, I think that helps his appeal to certain other programs like a Penn State, for example, who are looking for a coach. To be clear, I'm betting on Missouri I'm betting on Drinkwitz staying at Missouri, but yeah, if anything, there's nothing about Drink's seat that is warm. If anything, he's a very hot candidate for other jobs.
Yeah, I think I've seen him as a favorite or near the favorite for about 3 or 4 different jobs over the last few weeks. So, but I think he should stay there. I do think it's kind of similar to with Lane Kiffin. Sometimes you just have it good where you're at.
I think so.
Yeah, and you think, hey, there's something better, and it's not always the case. But I do want to touch on the quarterback battle because I personally think it's going to be the 2 freshmen because I don't think Shapen's going to play, especially off of Lebby's comments on Monday where he said, hey, he has to be 100% healthy to start. Otherwise, he's not playing. And so I think it'll be the 2 freshmen. But what have you seen from Zollers?
Well, Matt Zollers, his first career start, obviously last week, didn't go great. You're going against a really good Texas A&M team, and it looked like he had a bloody hand. His throwing hand got banged up at some point in the game, so that status could be certainly something to watch here because obviously Missouri, well, they're down their last scholarship quarterback here, so if he's injured, I mean, my goodness, it could be really ugly here. But obviously, he's going to start the game. I mean, he finished out the game, all that stuff. Hopefully, his status is a little better. I think Missouri has to do a better job against Mississippi State of just making the game a little bit easier for Zollers, just more screen passes, just that type of thing, more easy completions. I don't know. It just felt like 7 for 22. That just feels like in modern day football, that's on the coaching staff quite a bit. He looked a lot better than that against Vanderbilt when he came in the second half with no real preparation time in that week.
Yeah, Missouri needs to take what Georgia just did to Mississippi State, where they just ran it down their throat, and that made the game so much easier for Gunnar Stockton. Stockton really didn't have a great early part of the game, but because they started running, then the secondary started being susceptible to things, and obviously there was injuries, and John Manning got ejected, and all this stuff. But Missouri, one of the best running backs in the country in their backfield, so if they could kind of take that approach, I think that would bode well for them. For Mississippi State, if Shapen plays, like he's obviously just a solid quarterback. He's not an NFL guy, in my opinion. He's just a solid college quarterback. He's a guy that you kind of want on your team just because when you're rebuilding, just because he's not really going to beat you very often. Now, he's done that a few times this year. But Kamario Taylor, on the other hand, that's your future. And you can see the flashes of the future, but you also see the not polished as a passer because he's a freshman. So you see a little mix from him. I think he throws the deep ball really well, but I think he struggles with the touch in the short to intermediate passes. But on the flip side, his legs make him so much more dynamic, and you pair him with Fluff Bothwell and Devon Booth, and that's really, I think, their pathway to success, except for Missouri is one of the better defenses in college football. So,
and that's the thing. Missouri, I think in particular, has done a pretty good job against running quarterbacks as well. They really shut down Diego Pavia for Vanderbilt with some good scheming. I thought putting Darius Smith in as a spy. He just simply had too much size and speed. Pavia couldn't get away from him in key situations. So, yeah, I think that Missouri defense, there's really not a whole lot of holes there. So if you're Mississippi State, I think it is the right move to make the move to the young player there, to DeMario. I just think see what he looks like here to finish out the season because, like you say, obviously Shapen is not the future of the program.
Yeah, and at this point, yes, you're trying to get a bowl game, but you don't have much to lose because Kamario's already burned his red shirt. It's not one of those things that, like, you have to be mindful of that. It's already burned. So you might as well play him and get him some game experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I could totally see it being one of those things where they're like, Shapen is listed as out because they don't want it to be that he got benched kind of thing, kind of save face on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I could see that happening.
I'm now totally flipping my original thought. I was going, this could be a high-scoring. What in the world am I talking about? There's no way this is going to be a high-scoring game with Missouri's offense, how it's looked, how that Missouri's defense has looked. What in God's name was I talking about? Completely wrong. That guy was an idiot 5 minutes ago. Let's, whatever the total is, go under. That's how this is playing out.
Yeah, go way under the way the quarterbacks are playing. Yeah. But I'm glad you mentioned the Vanderbilt game because that's a game I think you guys probably win if Purdue it doesn't get hurt. Now, maybe I don't want to say for sure, but I just felt like y'all would have had a better chance, obviously.
Yeah, I could see why you'd think that on paper. To be fair, though, I think really the Missouri offense fading looked a little bit better in the second half when Zollers came in. Yeah. So I could totally see why from the outside looking in you would think that. I just want to be fair here and not make all the excuses in the world for the Tigers.
Well, and I wanted to bring it up because y'all did do a really good job on Pavia. And Kamario Taylor, while his ceiling might be higher than that, it's not that right now. He's not there right now. So you could have some success. And they're different runners, so we'll see what happens there. But who do you got in the game?
Well, I've got to stick with the Tigers at home. I mean, I'm not feeling very confident at the moment. I think the fact that Mississippi State frankly got run over a little bit by Georgia last week. That does just
Yeah.
give me more confidence that the Tigers will take it home here. So I will stick with Missouri for sure. And a team that I will say under Drinkwitz, we saw it last year, even after Missouri got knocked out of the college football playoff, they still played hard and won their last couple games against Oklahoma and Arkansas. So I think at the very least you'll see a good effort from Missouri on Saturday. What do you think, Jaron?
Yeah, I think you'll see a good effort from Missouri. Honestly, like looking at it, I trust Missouri's defense more than South Carolina, Mississippi State's defense. And so that's why it makes me want to say Missouri. But before the season, I picked Mississippi State to win 6 games, and that 6th win was this game. So I can't go away from it. I got to kind of stick with that. And it was just because all the unknowns from Missouri before the year. And obviously I wanted Mississippi State to make a bowl game. So I'll stick with it, but I'm going to go low scoring. I'm going to go like 17-14, 17-13, somewhere in there. I think it's very low scoring.
I think you're right, obviously, as I started to realize over the last few minutes. I think that's the right call. I really do. The more I think about how this is going to play out, it could be a pretty ugly ball game, but you know what? Somebody's got to win it.
Yeah, but everything tells me to pick Missouri. Missouri's a better defense. Missouri's got the running game. It tells me go Missouri, but I have to go with my before the season prediction. I got to stick with it.
It would go against the trend that we just talked about, where Missouri typically beats the teams that it's supposed to. So right. I'm gonna stick with that trend.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, of course, Jaron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, when the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with SupplyHouse. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? SupplyHouse has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit SupplyHouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's SupplyHouse.com. Real people, real service.
All right, Missouri ends up blowing out Minnesota yesterday in basketball. The Tigers end up winning a game by 23 points. The spread was about 7. Projections were 7, 8, 9 points, something like that. So a nice win for Missouri on paper, to be sure. But I will say a lot of concerns that I have that have popped up for this team all season aren't really going away yet. But you know what? Let's start off with the positive. And one thing I noticed, it was a very methodical basketball game, especially in the first half, but I think that continued through most of the game. And considering Missouri, when Dennis Gates first got on campus, was playing at hyper speed, well, they are really, really slowed down this season. And for good reasons, I would suppose. I think Dennis Gates is thinking, well, a few things. I think mostly this is he's saying this is probably my most effective way to play offense this year. And to that point, I'm always impressed. You guys have been hearing me complain about Dennis Gates' defense lately. Well, on the other side of the ball, offensively, I continue to be impressed with how this coach can just simply manufacture an offense with just about anybody, really. I mean, you give me Mark Mitchell and 4 shooters around him, and, well, it turns out Missouri can be a pretty good offensive team, because even though the Tigers, it felt like, it just was a slow-paced first half, well, the Tigers were still shooting 50% from the field in that game, getting to the line frequently. And it just seems like Dennis Gates can't help but manufacture a pretty efficient offense for the most part. It just seems like what he does as a coach. And to that point, one problem Missouri does have, though, is because Dennis Gates is such an offensive-minded coach, well, Shawn Phillips is having a real tough time right now staying on the floor. And I thought, man, am I overanalyzing it a couple games ago when Phillips, of course, sat out the previous game? But no, it turns out I was right, as I often am. Because the thing is, Shawn Phillips is a really explosive player around the rim, but he's also not a shooter, not a jump shooter at all. And let's be honest, Mark Mitchell, if he ever shoots another three-pointer, I might shoot myself. Okay, that was a little extreme, but you see my point. I just don't know that I'm ever happy with a Mark Mitchell three-point shot. So when you play those two guys together, obviously you have floor spacing problems. That's going to cause the paint to be jammed up for your back cutters, your penetrators like Jaden Stone and Anthony Robinson getting into the paint. And because of that, well, you're seeing Luke Northweather, who's a guy who can knock down a three-pointer. In fact, he's 6 of 10 on the season so far from downtown. Northweather's been a real pleasant surprise, I would say, so far. The only thing is Northweather 0 for 3 from 2 on the season. He has yet to score from anywhere inside of the three-point line. And, well, that actually very much lines up with what his scouting report was as an Oklahoma Sooner, too. So Northweather is providing value offensively simply by being able to effectively space the floor and not only knock down those shots, but get a defender out of the paint and open things up, again, for those Missouri perimeter players. So, again, the problem is for Missouri, I was thinking after the Kansas State exhibition that Shawn Phillips was pretty clearly one of their best 3, 4, 5 players, but now I'm just wondering, maybe he and Mark Mitchell are just not going to be able to play together and give Missouri any type of efficient offensive game. It's seeming much like the Josh Gray problem from last season. I was simply hoping that because Phillips is such a much more explosive player that, well, we'd just be able to use him better, just be able to use him more effectively around the rim with finishing, with vertical alley-oops on pick and dives, that type of thing. Just haven't quite seen that yet, and just throwing it into the post, a couple times just seems to bog things down for Missouri early in the game more than anything. And in fact, yeah, that was the worst part of the game for Missouri, was the very start, especially offensively, when, well, nobody was really able to put the ball in the basket except for Sebastian Mack in the first few minutes of the game. And the thing is, while Luke Northweather has certainly been a pleasant surprise on this team, we are simply a bad defensive rebounding team. I mean, it was pathetic in the first half, to be honest with you. And I thought the effort got better, and therefore the rebounding got a little better. But I thought this team was going to be big after the Kansas State exhibition. And, well, without Trent Pierce, without Honor Boateng right now, and with Missouri clearly not completely trusting Shawn Phillips to play significant minutes next to Mark Mitchell, your best player probably, we just don't look very big right now. And, it's just, that worries me a little bit, because this has a chance to be a good offensive team. I don't know that they're going to be an elite offensive team. Right now, the numbers are saying they are. A lot of that has to do with projections. Right now, the numbers say, hey, they're projected to have the 11th best offense in the entire country. I don't know if I buy into that yet. Again, Mark Mitchell, and you put 4 shooters around him for space, that's a pretty effective offense. It's simple, but I think it'll be effective. 71st on defense right now. That seems pretty generous, I got to be honest with you, by how Missouri is playing right now. And rebounding-wise, even 144th in defensive rebounding. Right now, Missouri just simply doesn't even look like they're that good of a defensive rebounding team. By the way, speaking of rebounding, I got to give Jacob Cruz a lot of credit. My dad thought he played his best game as a Tiger. Then after the game, Chris Gervino said the same thing. And you know what? After I thought about it, I think I'm inclined to agree. Not only did Cruz knock down 4 3-pointers in the ball game for 14 points, but 8 defensive rebounds. That's really important, because at 6'8", Cruz is never going to be a good defender, I don't think, in the SEC. I think that's a pretty safe assumption for this year. So he's, at the very least, he's got to rebound. I mean, he is 6'8". He has got to rebound, defensively in particular. Offensively, I don't really care. Get back on defense. But defensively, this team has to get better on the glass. And quite honestly, our guards, I emphasized this in my previous episode, this is certainly not something that is unique to Missouri, but our guards, our 3 men, everyone on the roster has to think about rebounding positioning better, because it just seems like we're not even thinking about positioning in terms of rebounding a lot of times. Simply put, Missouri needs to do a better job of boxing out. But it's not only that, it's before the box out. Just getting yourself out of position constantly by reaching and lurching and all this stuff. I just think Missouri's got to get out of that, or else they're never going to get enough stops to be an NCAA tournament team this season. Obviously, the Tigers, I think, honor Boateng. The fact that I thought he was maybe the most pivotal guy on the roster this season, I think we're kind of seeing that playing out. If you have one more perimeter player who's a threat to score and a big body defensively, I think Boateng has the potential, at least, to be one of the best defenders on this Missouri roster. Getting him back would be huge. Trent Pierce, obviously getting another big body would be big as well. Pierce, not a great defensive player on the perimeter, that is for sure. So I don't know that defensively he's going to help much, but certainly offensively, and just getting a guy who has some size and can maybe grab a defensive rebound. Thank Jacob Cruz a little bit too in terms of Trent Pierce. And, well, I think he might get a decent idea of how he can help defensively, even if he's not a great perimeter defender. At least in theory, with his size, he can get some more defensive rebounds, right? That's something that Missouri seems like they're really going to struggle with this season. Again, if Shawn Phillips can't get on the court, I think this is going to be kind of a smallish team, a smaller team than I was expecting, and also really a team that probably plays a lot slower than I was expecting too. And while that's seeming to work, it is a little bit interesting because it feels like Mark Mitchell, one of your best fast break players in the country, when you get ahead of steam, that's one of his best attributes. But right now it just seems like Missouri feels like they're better off playing a little bit more slowly. But hey, thanks for joining me here on this edition of Locked On Mizzou, by the way. And by the way, thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcasting network out there. And until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks again for listening to Locked On Mizzou.